The Zoo at the Edge of the World. Third night. We're sure that performance left you breathless. With wild beasts just a stone throws away, you'd have to be dead to not be thrilled. But here at the Zoo at the Edge of the World, we make it our business to marry death and anger with safety and splendor. After a day of thrills, expect a night of delights, a candlelight soiree by our reflecting pond, an ice cream social in the great hall. But you needn't choose just one. They're both open until midnight. And if you're wondering how our animal trainers worked their magic with the animals in the circus ring, there will be a special presentation after dinner starring your master of ceremonies, Ronum Rackham, and his top staff. Listen closely. He may have some tips on how to train your little ones back home. Chapter 18. You find out who's responsible. You bring them to me, Father commanded to no one in particular. Someone set fire to that tent. The heads of all the work groups were in his office. Tim and I stood shoulder to shoulder with 13 crew captains. Everyone was solemn. I tried to keep from shaking. Father was standing hunched over his desk, hair in his face, mustache beaded with sweat. I glanced at Tim, who stared straight ahead, hard-faced. Zargo was to my left, strong and calm. But the ragged breaths around me betrayed the other men's fears. I felt it overwhelming me. My right hand burned with fire, and I had to clench it into a tight fist to keep from screaming. Sabotage, yeah! His voice was a torn whisper. We had a traitor here last week, Nathan Linked. Father referred to the man who led the strike and was killed by the jaguar. Luck doesn't favor traitors. A snort sounded to the left of me. It was Leto Flute. Something funny? Father asked deadly serious. Leto quickly swallowed whatever had been on the tip of his tongue and said, No, sir. Are you laughing at me? Father raised up to his full height. The air seemed to leave the room. Do you wish I weren't here? Leto, bothering you with this petty concern? Father took a step toward him. This was all it took. No, sir. No, not at all. Leto bowed his head. I've respect for you, sir. Utmost respect. I'm so very sorry. He's lying, Tim said, stepping forward. What? Leto said, sweating. No. I heard him the other day taunting Marlin, Tim continued. He told me he hoped you didn't return from your hunt, that the jaguar would kill you. I did not, Leto shouted, but Father was already on him. He grabbed Leto by the shirt and rammed him against the wall. Want me dead, huh? He rocked him against the wood beams. Want to burn down my zoo? Leto hadn't done anything. I deserved the punishment. Part of me wanted to be in my father's grip, for him to shake and strike me for what I'd done, and all the people I'd endangered. But another part wanted to strike back, to stand over him and shout that he was a bully and a blowhard, and that he'd gone back on his word. These animals were ours to protect. He always said so, not to turn each other over for entertainment. I felt the words boiling up in my throat. My palm ached, and the pain propelled me forward. But I was caught at the back of the collar by a big, strong hand. Zargo pulled me back and wrapped another arm around my chest. Leave it, he whispered to me. What do you have to say for yourself? Father bellowed. It was the jaguar. Leto's lips pulled back as he pronounced each word, and flecks of spit sprayed my father's face. It is a curse he laid on us for bringing him here. It is true. What we did was wrong, and this is a punishment. Father pulled back slightly, unnerved by Leto's words. Zargo Hunt stepped in front of him and echoed him. It is true. The jaguar laid a curse. Father released Leto and stared at him blankly. You're saying a jaguar set fire? His eye rolled around the room. An animal? Animal has power, said one of the men. A curse, said another. One by one, all the men were casting blame. The jaguar! They shouted. We must kill it! Father turned away from the crush of men. I won't have you giving me orders. Mr. Rackham, Zargo spoke up, how do you deny I deny what I wish, Father bellowed. I will not harbor superstition, and I will not be governed by fear. I'll throw you all in a cage. He pounded his fist on his desk. Then you will tell me what happened to my circus. The room was quiet. The men feared the jaguar, but Father was the more present threat. The cat will not turn my zoo into a jungle. We are civilized here. He stamped his foot. Tim, Marlin, come here. We broke ranks with the workers and went to our father's side. He put one massive hand on each of our shoulders. My boys will be guarding the jaguar's den from now on. None of you goes near it until I find out who burned my circus. I volunteer for first watch, Tim barked in a soldier's voice. Father considered him. Marlin will watch the den tonight, he said, squeezing my shoulder. But I'm the oldest, Tim protested. That's not right. Who holds the paw? Father said. We run this zoo on merit. You want fairness? Get a lawyer. Father turned to me. You can do it, son, he whispered. Behind him, Tim burned with rage, but I still nodded. I know you can. Father winked and dismissed the men. They crept out of the small room, sullen and shaken, muttering to themselves. Tim glared at me. I half suspected he knew what I'd done, but that was impossible. He was only jealous. No one knew the truth. Father smiled at me. My right palm was seared with burning fire. I smiled back. Chapter 19. The jaguar lay silent across the darkened room. Father had outfitted me with a rifle and bayonet to ward off intruders. It wasn't the first time I'd held a gun, but I wasn't much of a shot. I didn't like blowing apart the coffee cans we used for practice, and I'd never hunted something living. How could I protect the jaguar if someone came after him? I adjusted my grip on the barrel. Father and I entered the ruby palace, and the light of the oil lamp twinkled in the 100 bits of light. But their glimmer was diminished somehow, not as bright as it had been the night before. There was rain in the air, heavy and thick, and the lamp struggled to keep the damp darkness. My father told me to stand and positioned the rifle in my hands. He kicked my feet together and told me to stand up straight. If anyone comes, shout, "Halt!" Father said. Fire a warning shot at his feet. If that doesn't stop him, aim for the chest. He addressed me like a soldier. Understood? I nodded my head. The bayonet, he added, taking the rifle from my hand, is used in close quarters. If a shot to the chest isn't enough to stop him, slash to push him back and then jab. I blinked my eyes rapidly, trying to hide my fear, but Father saw it. He set down the gun and knelt. I know this isn't the way you'd prefer things to be, he said. The skin around his eyes crinkled, and a pained smile formed under his mustache. Tim's the warrior in the family. He's got that part in me. And I know it isn't easy for you, living with him. He's hard on you, just like everyone else. My face felt flushed, and a lump rose up in my throat. I turned away from Father. He put a finger to my chin and drew me back to him. Do you ever wonder why I don't stop him when he's cruel to you? My head grew hot, and I was very afraid I would start to cry, because I did wonder that. I had wondered it my entire life. My father was the strongest man in the world, but he never stopped anyone from being cruel to me. It's because Tim's got the warrior in me, but you've got something else. And though no one has expected much from you, I've always known something was there. Tears filled his eyes then, and he ran along the crinkles. When you walked out of that cage with those apes, everyone saw it. You've got the best part of me, son. Tears were in my eyes, too, though I couldn't say if they were from pride or fear. I know you'll do great things, Father said, handing me the gun. I blinked the tears away and nodded my head. When Father left, the jaguar stopped pretending to be asleep. We looked at each other, but said nothing. We must have spent hours in silence, because eventually the antbirds began to sing. They only do that just before dawn. I should say I'm sorry, I said. The jaguar didn't respond. He reclined lazily, his paw beneath his chest, looking up at the flickering oil lamp. A cloud of gnats hovered around the flame. I mean to say I'm sorry for what happened today. My father in the circus? I'm the one who lit the fire. The jaguar blinked his eyes. I know, he said. Father's furious. He thinks it was one of the men. I see. But the men say it was you. They say holding you here is a curse and we should kill you. That's why Father has me standing guard. I see that, too. The jaguar's uninterest enraged me. If you see so bloody much, how come you're in this cage? How come you killed Natham and caused all this trouble? I realized I was pointing the rifle toward him. The blade of the bayonet poked through the bars of the cage. The jaguar considered its tip. I've just puzzled something out, he said. What? I sighed and withdrew the bayonet. The jaguar perked up, his yellow eyes squinting. Since you came here, I've been confused by that lamp. I thought it had captured moonlight, and I've wondered about those insects that circle the flame. He lifted his eyebrows at the lamp and the cloud of gnats that surrounded the light. They fly around and around, crashing into each other, and then they get too close and poof, they're gone. Wasn't really in the mood for questions, I said. Bugs just do that. I don't know why. There's a reason for every action, the jaguar responded. Today I watched men flee from fire in terror, and I thought, why does the gnat fly toward it? Because they're stupid, I said. I don't know. I can't talk to bugs. Yes, they're too simple to speak with us, but simplicity does not lack reason. Then why? I said. Do you know? The reason the gnat circles the flame, the jaguar said as another bug burst into vapor, is because they make the same mistake I did. They think it's the moon. So bugs want to fly to the moon? No, he said. At night, insects navigate by the position of the moon. If they can keep it to one side of them, they know they're heading straight. Huh? I said. That's how sailing ships do it too, except they use the stars. For all the years since the world was made, that is how insects have kept their flight. And for eons it worked because there were no bright lights beside the moon. The gnats that see your flame mistake it for the moon, and as they've done since the dawn of time, they try to keep it to one side. I looked up at the cloud of tiny bugs, all circling the flame like planets around the sun. But the fire is so much closer than the moon, I said. So when they fly by it, they've got to keep turning it to the same place and circle round and round, chasing it, the jaguar purred. And in their frenzy, they bump into their friends and grow confused. So attracted are they to the light that they fly closer and closer, maddened by its ancient pull, and are swallowed in the heat. That's a shame, I said. Another gnat burst into smoke. The crackling noise made me wince. The simple instincts of that gnat drove him true in the night. But now the machines of man, his basic nature does him in. We are all governed by instinct. But like the gnats, man's instincts have been warped by his machines, as you call them. Look at the lock. All of us need to eat and store our food. But once you give a creature a lock, he thinks, I can capture all the prey in the forest and lock it up for my pleasure. Instead of taking what he can eat and enjoy, he strives to take it all and locks up the entire world. Sounds like a king, I said. They want to own everyone and everything. Yes, the jaguar purred. And what happens when two kings meet? There's war, I said. The jaguar nodded his head. We kill to eat in the jungle, but there are no locks and cages. There is no war. I thought of my father. He was the king of this place, and that made me a prince. One day I'd get the keys to all the locks. I turned to the jaguar. You told me people choose to be apart from the animals. Was there a time before when we were the same? I was not around before, so I don't know. The jaguar flashed his eyes. Most men's tongues go unused, but you're unique. I gave you this gift, Marlin, because you could receive it. I didn't feel well. My hands were shaking. Another gnat burst into flames, and the crack of its body breaking apart set off a panic in me. I don't want to be a king, I said, and I don't want to hurt anyone. But ever since you've given me this power, I feel like I'm doing it all the same. I fail my father. I fail the animals. Tell me what I should do. He slid one enormous paw between the bars of his cage and curled the other around the lock. He licked his nose, and for a moment I felt hunted. You can let me out. His ears were peaked, his nostrils flared slightly, taking in my scent, and his haunches flexed. He was a curtain of black that could draw over me in an instant, snuffing me out. The gun rattled in my hand. I can't do that, I said. Of course you can. He raised his voice slightly. I don't have the key. You can get it, he snarled. Free me and all the others. End this nightmare of confinement. No, I won't, I said, taking a step back. This place is my home. These animals are my friends. Friends you keep under lock and key, the jaguar said. This place is my father's, I said, feeling indignant. It's not mine. I can't do that. It would kill him. Then what's the alternative? The jaguar retorted. Killing me? You're safe here, I said. We'll protect you. That's why you're here, to show everyone there's nothing to be afraid of. I parroted my father's words with tears in my eyes. I had always believed him. Marlin? Tim's voice called from beyond the door of the Ruby Palace. He was early. That's my brother, I said, taking the lamp from the hook. We'll protect you, I swear it. The jaguar considered me silently. I wiped my eyes and opened the door. Fourth day. Break out of the resort today and immerse yourself in the freedom and beauty of Guyana. Probe the dark depths of the jungle and see what it means to be truly wild, but in luxury, of course. Catch a ride on the Saint of the Animals, the gloriously appointed riverboat that brought you here. After breakfast, meet up at the docks and take a journey even farther up the river. Spot crocodiles and swinging tree monkeys in their natural habitat. Sing along with the macaws and throw fish to the manatees. For the truly adventurous, hop into one of our rowboats and take an excursion up the river with an experienced guide. This is not for the faint of heart. If that all seems a bit much, relax back at the zoo instead. The buffet will be open all day. Each meal accompanied by the civilizing strains of our house band. Take in the gardens and the butterfly house and visit all the animals you haven't yet had a chance to see. This is your last full day in the zoo at the edge of the world. Make it the best one. Chapter 20. Tim pulled me outside and shut the door to the Ruby Palace behind me. You look well rested, he said blankly. Have a nap in there, did you? I scowled at him and handed over the gun. Save it, he said with a wave of his hand. Get to bed. The door to the Ruby Palace had locked automatically when Tim closed it. I sighed and began to fumble with the key. I've got the key. Tim pushed my hand away. I stood there waiting for him to unlock the door and go inside. He was a full hour early, and Father had told us I wasn't supposed to leave until Tim had gone in. I gestured for him to go through the door. Are you deaf as well? Tim glared at me. Get to bed. Aren't I what? Tim said. I don't have to explain myself to you now, do I? God, this place is a joke. Tim pressed his finger into my ribcage. Once this place is mine, first thing I'm going to do is fire you, you little snot. I put my hand around his finger and moved it away from my chest. I gestured again for him to go inside. His eyes widened. Got a problem listening to what I have to say? He pushed me and I almost fell backward. You don't want to get in my way. I stepped up to him. He was a full foot taller than me, and he leaned down, breathing onto my forehead. I sensed he was about to hit me, but I didn't care. Bah, 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 I stammered furiously. My tongue cracked against the top of my mouth. My mouth twisted into a terrible shape, and I spewed half words at him. You've been a terrible brother. You've never been a friend to me. I try to be nice to you, and you spit in my face. Even father knows what a rage-fueled brat you are. It didn't matter to me that I couldn't form the words. I was loud, I was angry, and I made my meaning clear. I am not a mute. Tim blinked and pulled back slightly. I'd surprised him, but he didn't know what to do. There was spittle on his face. He wiped it off with the sleeve of his shirt. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it again. For once, he had nothing to say. I turned from him and trotted down the steps of the golden path. Too much had happened in the last few days for me to care about petty arguments with Tim. I was tired. I wanted to go to bed and dream of something else. The bed sheets were sticky and hot. There was no sleeping during the day in the jungle, and that's why everyone did all they could to avoid the night shifts. I ripped the cotton sheets off my straw mattress to try to get cool, but the prickly mattress scratched my skin raw. The sun was on fire, and there was no rest for me that morning. I trudged my way to the great hall for breakfast. The guests were in their fancy day clothes, while my hair was matted with bits of straw, and my work shirt stuck to my skin. But I didn't care what I looked like to them. From the corner of my eye, I saw Father breakfasting awkwardly at a table with the Duke and Duchess, and I regretted ever leaving bed. I tried to make my way back to the exit, but he spotted me. Marlin! Father called from the table. Marlin, come join us. He had a chair pulled out for me next to him. Good morning, soldier, he said loud enough for them both to hear. Looks like you've had a trying night. The Duke and Duchess didn't take the bait. They had no interest in what I'd done to look so terrible. Marlin stood guard all night, Father said. Gave you an appetite, eh, boy? He clapped his hand on my back and summoned the waiter to bring me some potatoes and bacon. You work him too entirely hard, the Duke said, trying to be polite. Yes, the Duchess arched her eyebrow. He's a busy boy. He's going to own this zoo one day, won't you, Marlin? Father smiled broadly at me. He put a hand on my shoulder as though he expected me to respond. He'd never tried to engage me in conversation in front of guests before. That would be something to see, the Duchess said and clucked her tongue. Father looked at her blankly. How do you mean, Your Grace? The Duke elbowed her, but she wasn't going to stop. He'll need to learn a few things, like how to say hello. The Duchess chuckled to herself. Courtesy first. The Duke turned red, and I saw a look of contempt on Father's face. My boy is more than competent, Father said quickly. This is a family business and will be run by my family always. Here, here. The Duke raised his glass, trying to cut the tension. Do your family business. May it ever be fruitful. Yes, the Duchess said. We are so lucky that we only have a girl and don't need to worry about her career. She'll marry the right man someday. She looked at me directly. Someone high-born, of course. Just then the server delivered our plates. Bacon and potatoes for all. But what about your family business right here? Father leaned over the table. Pardon me, said the Duke. Your new venture in Guyana, he said, taking a bite of bacon. Buying up land for a sugar forest? The Duke stiffened, as did the Duchess. They turned almost imperceptibly toward each other, as though they could consult through telepathy. Father looked up from his plate and gave a broad smile. I don't know where you'd hear something like that, the Duke said unconvincingly. I'm not even sure what that means, a sugar forest. Are you familiar with that term, my dear? The Duchess's skin tone began to match her rouge. I have a few friends in town in the land offices. Father buttered his toast calm as could be. Bids like that for jungle acreage don't go unnoticed. Your Grace, I know you're an intelligent man. Please don't pretend otherwise. The Duke wiped the corner of his mouth with a cloth napkin and pushed away the plate. The Duchess was watching him carefully, but now he ignored her. You've done well with this resort, old boy, but it's time for these lands to be developed. If someone can do it profitably and safely, it is being run profitably and safely, retorted father. The Duke laughed. I have no doubts of your profits, Captain, but judging from yesterday's events, I'd hardly call this resort safe. That fire was a fluke, said father, growing heated. I spent half my life exploring this jungle, the other half building this zoo, and I'll be cursed if I'm going to watch you burn it to raise sugarcane. Father slammed his palm on the table and shook the silverware. For a moment, everyone was quiet, even the Duchess. So, you're the other bidder, the Duke said stiffly, buying up the parcels between my parcels so I can't get a connected tract. We shall see what Governor Hinks has to say about you stifling progress in this colony. Yes, and we will see what he has to say about overreaching nobles bribing my employees to strike and shut me down. What did you say? The Duchess gasped. What did you just say to him? Olivia appeared at the table behind her father and gave everyone a start. Daddy, what's going on? The Duke threw a glance to his wife. Nothing, darling, nothing. I'm sorry. Please sit with us. He pulled out a chair, and Olivia sat down cautiously. How are you, Marlin? Captain Rackham? She greeted me and father. Very well, miss, father said. I nodded and gave a slight smile. Did you just wake up, my dear? The Duke asked. No, Olivia answered cautiously. In fact, Captain Rackham, I'm glad to see you. I wanted to ask what time the Jaguar exhibit opens. It opened at 8 a.m., father answered, just as the others did. Well, that's what I thought, Olivia said, looking puzzled. What do you mean, my angel? The Duchess asked, trying to sound cheery. It's 8:30 now, said Olivia, looking at her pocket watch, and I was just at the Ruby Palace, but the door was locked. Father and I turned to each other slowly, both hesitant to make eye contact and confirm what we already knew. Chapter 21. Father fired his pistol when Tim didn't answer the door to the Ruby Palace. The bullet blew the bolt half out of the jamb. He reached into the splintered mass of wood and wrenched it the rest of the way, then kicked the heavy frame. Slivers of split wood and bent metal jammed the door, but another kick swung it open. Tim lay on the floor of the den. Father rushed into the enclosure, and I followed with Zargo Hunt. Man Ray Lightfoot was keeping the Brideshires outside. They had insisted on coming with us, and I could hear him saying something in Arawak. Was Tim crying? I couldn't be sure. He buried his face in his shoulder and clutched an open wound on his forearm. Cloth and flesh mixed in a bloody pulp. I had to look away. The Jaguar paced his cage, breathing heavily. As he walked, red prints came off of his forepaws. The rifle was lying halfway inside the Jaguar's cage. The barrel pointed toward him. The bayonet had snapped off and lay blood-stained at the Jaguar's feet. Father was at Tim's side. What happened? He shouted. Tim didn't respond, but only buried his face farther in his shoulder. Help me, Father commanded, and Zargo went to his side. I hovered over the three of them, unsure of what to do. Let me see the wound, Zargo said. Keep off me, Tim snarled. We need to see it, Father said. Tim unclenched his hand from the wound, and Father probed it with his finger. Tim cried out in pain, but Father didn't stop. I suppose he realized what had happened before I did. You'll live, he said, taking off his overshirt and wrapping it round Tim's arm for a tourniquet. But with the doctor gone, you'll need to go to Georgetown. Tim groaned as Father yanked the knot tight. Maybe you'll meet a girl there. Tell her you almost killed a jaguar. Marlin's fault, Tim moaned. Left the cage open. I had to fight him. Father glanced at me and I panicked. The jaguar asked me to let him out, of course, but I never did. Could I have done it without remembering? How could he do that when I have the only key? Father said gruffly and pulled a brass key off his belt. How is the jaguar back in his cage? Why is the gun in there with him? The workers, Tim said weakly. Father pulled me up to him and put his hand in my shirt pocket. He pulled out the paw and turned Tim's face toward him with his boot. This is what you're after? He yelled, his eyes burning. I looked again at the rifle with the twisted bayonet, and it all came clear to me. That's why Tim had changed the guard early and wanted me to leave. He planned to kill the jaguar himself and say I'd left the cage open, forcing him to defend himself, or else that I'd abandoned my post and left the jaguar to our superstitious employees. Either way, I would be the worthless little brother again. But the plan hadn't worked. Father and Zargo lifted Tim by his armpits. It hurts, Tim screamed. But they already had him up. If you can try to kill my jaguar, then you can walk, Father said to him. With Tim in Zargo's arms, Father went to Jaguar's cage, picked up the damaged rifle, and slammed the butt against the metal door. The jaguar leaped back, hissing. You're no curse, Father said. You're just a bloodthirsty animal. They stared at each other across the bars. Father pointed the dented rifle barrel at Jaguar. I didn't know if it could still fire. Tim! I managed and broke the standoff. We'll take him to the boat, Father said. We took off toward the boat, Tim yelping all the way. Father laid Tim in a guest cabin on Saint of the Animals and told the captain, an Englishman named Reese Mundy, to sail to Georgetown and deposit Tim at Victoria Hospital in the High Quarter. Charo, our healer, would make the journey with him. Father ordered Mundy to depart as soon as we were off the ship. There might be a problem with that, the sailor replied. The gangplank, our bridge between the ship and solid ground, was packed with tourists. Sailors were struggling to stop them from boarding. The Duke of Bradshire stood at the front of the mob, arguing with the sailor. I could have you hanged for this, the Duke was saying. Then he spotted my father. Captain Rackham, we demand to be heard. Father looked nonplussed. Your Grace, what is it? Your zoo is dangerous. That's what? The Duke bellowed. The assembled guests called out their agreement. It was a throng of about 20, a fifth of the guests in this week's group. Some had luggage in their arms. We will not let this ship leave. It's my boy. Father took in the crowd. He's hurt. He needs a hospital. That may be true. The Duke turned from Father to the crowd. But it is my sacred duty to protect my countrymen, and this resort puts English lives in danger. The crowd sounded a note of agreement and panic. They were being turned into a mob by the Duke. When Father had first said the Duke had bribed our employees to strike, I hadn't believed it. But now it seemed clear to me that Olivia's father was trying to destroy our resort, though I still didn't understand why. Yesterday's fire was nearly deadly, and now your animals are making attacks, the Duke continued. I demand that you refund these citizens' fees and allow them return to Georgetown this afternoon. Refund! Shouted a man in a souvenir safari hat. Take us home! Yelled a woman with a parasol. We had to get Tim to Georgetown or his wounds would become infected. Your Grace and guests, please. Father tried to calm the crowd. The zoo is safe. This week's accidents were flukes. The ship must leave now. It will be back to pick you up tomorrow evening. There's plenty more to see and a refund. Let us go! The Duke stood at the front of the mob, entirely satisfied. The Duchess and Olivia finally squeezed through to stand next to him. Olivia's brow was knitted with worry. She mouthed, I'm sorry, to me across from the distance. I tried to summon a reassuring look for her, but couldn't. I turned away, bitterly. All right, Father relented. You may have your refunds and you may leave, but hear me. The Duke smugly motioned for the crowd to listen. This has been a trying week, Father said. I understand your frustrations. 2 new attractions have not gone as planned. I've never seen anything like it in all the years. Father trailed off. His eyes searched for a solution that wasn't there. Refunding the guests would cost a fortune, and loading them all onto the ship would take hours. We didn't have that long. But This is an extraordinary land. Father slowly raised his finger in the air. And you have accepted an extraordinary challenge in coming here. Every adversity you have faced, you conquered bravely and with dignity. Now let me give you one last chance. Zargo and I exchanged glances behind Father's back. My boy is injured, and I am sending him back to the city on this boat. Any guest who can be ready to go within the hour may join him and will be in Georgetown by midnight. Because you would be leaving one day early, I will grant each guest who elects to leave a full refund. A sound of agreement issued through the crowd, but Father gestured to keep them quiet. But anyone who elects to stay, completing their full week at the resort, will be returned to Georgetown tomorrow night, just a few hours past their scheduled arrival, to allow the boat to return to the zoo. And anyone who stays will be invited to a special event. Father smiled for the first time, and the Duke's smile began to fade. Tomorrow morning, before breakfast, the jaguar will be executed in the Sky Shrine. All remaining guests are invited to watch this dangerous animal meet his end. That is my offer. The saint of the animals departed 10 minutes later. Tim and the crew were the only ones on board.